Hello and welcome to Fresh Perspectives. My name is Gail, and I'm happy to say our favorite organic gardener from Fresh Perspectives is back with us again today. You know him, Bill Kuwik. Those of you who probably watched the last episode that he was on, you might remember that he gave me some tomato seeds and had me plant some lettuce seeds on that episode. And I have here samples. This is let's see, this is the last Saturday in April 2021, and this is one of the lettuce plants that we planted that day, and my husband is getting ready to plant these lettuce plants, transplant them into the garden. So as you can see, they're doing really well.
See, there's a root coming out the bottom, so they're ready.
Oh no, that's some. That is roots coming out through the bottom. I thought it was a piece of lint for a minute there, but it's not. Yeah, it's coming through the hole there. Well, actually, Carl was going to transplant this lettuce this past week, but then we wound up getting all that snow, so it hasn't been done yet. But there's a lot of those plants. And then what was that? Was black.
Oh, black crim, yeah, that's a black tomato.
Black crim.
Yep.
Tomato seeds that Bill gave us, and he planted these. These got planted more recently, maybe just within the last few weeks. And this is how those tomato plants look now on the 24th of April. So
now that's an heirloom, and it will be a black tomato, but I know...
it will be black in color?
Right. The skin is black. I think the inside is more reddish, but I know one friend of mine, he just absolutely loved those. In fact, the seeds for that came from plants from him. Or from, the plant. I grew the plants, gave him the plants, he grew them, and then gave me the tomatoes back, and I got the seed from him. But that he just absolutely loved those. He thinks they're sweet, but they also have like a lot of like the old-fashioned tomato flavor. So there's like that tartness, but it's just like a really rich flavored tomato.
Well, Carl picks up on tips from things you say on the program, and he did buy one of those heat mats that you were talking about, and he started the tomato plants on those. So
now another big thing for those, and I know I've probably mentioned this on previous shows, but that the Irt mulch, or the infrared transfer mulch, or solar mulch. I know I was talking to a friend on the way here. They passed by a friend's house, and I remember when they came to visit, I was saying, well, I use this plastic, and this one was like, it's just a black plastic garbage bag. It's like, no, this is actually an engineered plastic, so it allows the infrared to penetrate the soil. Black plastic shades the soil. Black plastic absorbs the heat in itself in the plastic, but it doesn't allow the heat to generate into the soil, penetrate into the soil, as well as the stuff that I use. It's a green plastic, so it allows the infrared to penetrate, but it blocks out the ultraviolet, so nothing will grow under it. And it's supposed to heat up the soil 11 degrees hotter than black plastic, and I think black plastic is 8 degrees above nothing, so it'll heat up your soil about 20 degrees warmer. And I swear by it for all my warm weather crops: the tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, melons, cucumbers, stuff like that. And it really does make a difference. But if you want some, I bought a 2,500 foot roll a couple years ago. So if you guys want a little piece, I can give you some.
Oh, okay. We could try it.
I know my one friend Scott got some from me last year, and he swore by it. He's like, man, I'd like to get some more from you this year. And so I don't know, I sell them like a 50-foot section or something like that. But yeah, the tomatoes, I started my early tomatoes on April 5th, and actually this Monday is. Yeah, this Monday will be 5 weeks till Memorial Day, so good time to plant your tomatoes right now. But of course, this show won't be airing for another month. But But I did some lettuce seedlings a couple of weekends ago, and unlike you, I just threw a row cover over them. They're still in flats out on my deck.
Oh, really?
And I never picked them up. We probably had 2 inches of snow on whatever that morning was a couple mornings ago.
Yeah, Carl didn't want to transplant the lettuce when he heard it was going to snow, because he said, well, lettuce can stand the cold, but the snow would probably wreck it.
Yeah, I would probably have put a row cover up over it if I was going to plant it before the snow. But you're right. Yeah, lettuce can actually go to 21 degrees without any damage. And honestly, when the snow is on top of it, it insulates it.
Oh.
I know when I first moved back here, I didn't know that there was naysayers, but I planted 5,000 lettuce seeds on August 1st, and then around Labor Day, I planted all those plants out in the field. And by like later October, I had all these beautiful heads of lettuce, and that would have been 1992. And I don't know if you remember this, but almost 30 years ago, but on, was that Veterans Day, on November 11th of 1992, I had 18 inches of snow up in Fredonia.
Well, I probably don't remember that
you probably had
exact
3
one,
feet.
but I know I've seen years when we had snow. You heard, were you around during the blizzard of '77?
Yes.
You know, it's.
I was just a baby.
So, anyways, I remember we had snow on the ground most of the month of October in the fall of '76. I mean, there was snow on the ground most of the time
Right.
in the fall.
Well, the weird thing was, I do remember that, because I always think of like the lake freezing around the end of January anymore, and I remember reading about that, and I was like, the lake was frozen in the middle of December, they said, because the snow piled up on it and blew.
Because we had all of that winter weather in October and November in
Right.
the fall of 1976,
Right.
and apparently what caused the blizzard of '77 was something about snow that had piled up on the lake, blew
Right. Yeah, there was
into
like
the
30,
area.
30
and
inches of snow on 300 feet of lake, or 300 miles of lake.
Yeah,
And it all
and-
blew into Buffalo. Because, I mean, we had snow here, I remember, because I was in an accident during that storm. And, not during the storm, but in the aftermath, there was a truck a loader taking snow from the side of the road just so there'd be room to put more snow. And, yeah, he backed into me.
Oh.
But yes, but I think most of it all blew into Buffalo. I mean, you see those like 25 and 30-foot drifts that they had after that.
yeah.
But yeah, it was still bad here. And I know actually the spring of '76, that I graduated from high school in '76, so I know there was in March there was a really, really bad, like up in where I lived in Dunkirk. I mean, we had an inch of ice. Trees limbs were down. I mean, whole trees just bent over. Too. So I mean, there was like, I know some people say it was like a mini ice age, but we did have a couple of really bad winters.
I remember they closed the school down for 2 solid weeks.
Well, back to the lettuce thing though. In '92, I had row covers over them before it snowed, and even though we got 18 inches of snow, I had people say, "Well, I guess your lettuce is all done now, isn't it?" Well, I wouldn't be so surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it's still good. And people like, "Oh, come on, there's 1.5 feet of snow." I'm like, "Well, we'll see." The snow melted, and I do remember it melted, refroze, and there was a period after that snow, when the snow was still there, that we went down to 13 degrees, which would not be good for lettuce even with row cover. That would be right about the limit, because the row covers give you 5 to 8 degrees protection. But I remember picking up the edges of the cover and there being ice on the covers and just like flipping the covers off, and here were these nice heads of lettuce, and with the 18 inches of snow, they were a little bit compact. But I distinctly remember on December 21st of that year, so about a month and a half later, harvesting lettuce and delivering to restaurants like the week before Christmas. So it did survive, and especially like the row cover helps. But again, if you have a little bit of snow and it drops even colder, the snow acts as an insulator because it's the dead airspace that insulates.
Oh,
But,
yeah. I know when it piles up, when it gets really, really deep around the sides of your house, it'll feel cozier inside your house.
Right, yep. And then even on the roof too, it helps to insulate that way too. But yeah, even like the snow we just had, I mean, my garlic is thickly mulched with straw, and a lot of the snow melted in other places, but where that straw was, and I snapped some pictures of it, and I said it was resting, but I have read that in this Bron England's Growing Great Garlic, he said that they have actually had measurable growth when the air temperature is 15 degrees.
Oh.
But I was thinking about it the other day, and let's say whatever the outside temperature was, let's say it was 30 the other day, and there's this much snow on top of the mulch, which is this thick, but what would that temperature be underneath? I mean, we've had such warm weather. I mean, I've been picking asparagus for 2 weeks. I've never picked asparagus.
I know
early.
earlier in April we were having some really warm weather. We even had a couple of days that got above 80 degrees.
We were in the 80s,
so,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, 70s, 80s, which, I know everybody complained about the snow, and I'm like, well, this is actually more typical of here, but those 70s and 80s are not.
Yeah.
But I think we're about 3 weeks ahead.
Yeah, well, we definitely get earlier springs than when I was a kid. I can remember you didn't see the ground until April.
Right.
But now it's nothing to see the snow all melted.
Yeah, I've seen mid 80s in March even now, but that never used to happen. But I think I kind of like what I heard many years ago from a Canadian climatologist, and he said that overall our seasons are warmer than they were, but he said winter has a tendency now to linger further into spring, so we do get later snows like this. I know April 3rd of 2006, when I lived in Forestville, we got 4 feet of snow. The next day it was 70. The next day it was 75. And this is going back a few years, but 96, I believe it was. You probably had this on the eve of Mother's Day. I woke up to a foot of snow on Mother's Day morning, which was May 13th.
Oh, yeah. I remember there was a Mother's Day that there was really deep snow back in the 1990s. I do remember
Pretty sure
that.
It was 96. I know I brew Belgian white or Belgian ales all winter, and so I used to throw a Belgian ale party, and it was always one of the weekends between Mother's Day and Memorial Day. And my party was the next weekend. I'm thinking, I got 50 people coming over. I can't have everybody in my house. I thought it'd be a nice weekend, nice day. And so snowed on the 12th into the 13th, and the next weekend would have been like the 19th, 20th or something like that. It was 86 degrees on Saturday morning, the morning of my party. Luckily cooled down to 82, and it was very breezy.
I remember one time, it was when Carol and I were first together. I can remember a beautiful sunny April morning. I'm pretty sure it was April. A sunny April morning, and it was like in the 70s. And then found out later that they had been having an ice storm all along Lake Erie, Westfield, Dunkirk, Buffalo, all along there. They were having an ice storm. I mean, normally it would be the other way around, they'd be getting, of course. So just to show you just that short distance, I mean, it's only 6 miles from Mayville to Westfield, and here they were getting this ice storm all along Lake Erie, and we were having a sunny, warm day.
Yeah, well, like that October surprise storm they had. And what was that? That was in '06 in Buffalo. I mean, it was clear and sunny here all day, and we didn't get any snow. I don't think. They got 3 feet in some places up there. But
I remember that.
I know we wanted to talk a little bit about wild food foraging, and this is like really a perfect time right now. I mean, this is end of April, and I know I'm on a Facebook page where people will note their sightings or their picking of morel mushrooms, and I've been watching it come from the south to the north, and this is like right now. This is the very beginning
for Chautauqua County.
Well, yeah, this part of New York State, and it will literally go for another month. But I mean, I have to, and they're hard to see. I mean, they're really, really hard to see. And I know friends of mine that have found them. They said they'll be standing there looking and looking and looking, and then they get down low, and when you can see the shape of the mushroom sticking up through the leaves, but they're almost the same color as the dead leaves that are on the ground. So you could, and I've known many, many people that have been, I was standing there, I stepped on it before I even saw it. Or I know these guys, they were out wild turkey hunting in the spring. The guy was in his spot, and he says it started to get light. He started looking around. He was surrounded by them, but.
Well, right by our clothesline at home, there's some sort of little mushrooms, little itty bitty ones that come up all over the place around this one tree stump.
Post,
That's on the ground though, not on the stump, but on the ground, and and then it kind of spreads out. Some years it spreads way out. I don't know what that is.
You don't know what type of tree it was?
No, I guess I couldn't tell you right now.
'Cause they typically
I'd
grow
have
under
to ask.
dead elms, dead or dying elms, but
Really?
just about under any hardwood, they say.
Any
they'll grow.
hardwood.
I have to admit, people say, well, you should do a course on it. It's like, I have found so few morels in my life, I don't think I'd try to do that. I've looked and looked, and I mean, old apple orchards is another
Old
place.
apple orchards?
Where they're supposed to be but then there's this whole thing about if there was a burn, like there was a forest fire or something like that, I want to say like the next year you'll find a lot of them, but then I've read more recently that that's only in the western United States. It doesn't really happen the same way in the eastern United States. So I don't really, I'm no expert at it, obviously, but
Yeah,
I mean, I know, certain wild edible mushrooms, and I could identify a morel. There is a false morel also, so it looks kind of like usually a morel. It looks like a sponge. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's kind of spongy on the top.
Morel looks spongy.
Yeah, so like normally a mushroom cap would open up and you would see the gills underneath. On a morel, they look spongy on the outside, and there's no real. I mean, it is sort of a cap with a stem, but the spores actually come out of the whole top. So all those little spongy things are like that's where the spores are. But yeah, the black ones usually come out first, and then the yellows or the blondes come out a little bit later. But this is like right now, like I said, perfect time. Like I think typically for here with the season, and sometimes they'll come up through snow.
Oh,
but
will
they?
they?
Because it's more of the ground temperature, but it's typically around like I said, around now, like maybe the middle of April, you might start looking, but sort of, like now, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd of April. Usually on north slopes, you can find them right up until Memorial Day, thereabouts. But very, very choice edible. They're so.
They're really good if you know what you're looking for.
I mean, sometimes I think some people look at me like, what? I mean, they're $60 a pound at Wegmans sometimes. Now, I don't go in there and buy 5 pounds of them or anything like that, but I mean, I'll go in there and get a little handful of them, and it might be, a quarter pound. I don't have any problem with spending $15 on some really nice mushrooms, but yeah, they I mean, those are the wild ones. The wild ones are usually around $60, $59.99 a pound.
Oh, wow.
The cultivated are usually in the neighborhood of about half that, about $29.99, like $30 a pound. But they are good. I mean, so even if you don't want to spend $60, you could still get a little of it and try it. But yeah, and I know we were talking about the ramps are out right now. The wild leeks are everywhere, and then wild dandelion is available, and then I have mustards, wild mustard that grows on my place. So it's always. I'll sometimes actually, if I had morels, just make an omelet out of all 4 of those things: the ramps, the dandelion, the mustard, and the morels. But and I know we were talking earlier that one really simple but very nutritious recipe, because I want to say I think vitamin A in dandelion is like one of the highest sources of vitamin A, and I want to say like 41,000 units per pound or something like that.
Really?
International units for dandelion.
Now, let's see. Now, do you use the entire dandelion plant?
When I make this recipe, I use the root, the stalk, and the leaves. I don't usually use the stems of the flowers or the flowers. It's just the leaves, the crown, and the roots. And but what I do is I wash them really, really thoroughly. Scrub the roots off so there's no dirt on them. I use a little brush, and then equal amounts of dandelion to the wild ramps. And I suppose you could put it in the food processor, but it's supposed to be like minced, like very fine. Just what my recipe said, whatever water was still clinging to them after you wash them. So you don't add a lot of water. A couple pinches of sea salt, depending on how big of a batch you're going to make, and just enough whole grain flour to make them stick together. So it shouldn't be like a doughy kind of a ball that you're going to deep fry. It's just like you're going to see the leeks or the ramps and the dandelion. You'll see a lot of green with just that little bit of flour paste holding it together.
Well, for people on gluten-free diets, they could use probably chickpea flour.
Well, rice flour is gluten-free also. But there's a lot of flours that are gluten-free now too. But I don't know how the chickpea flour would stick for binding that. It might work. I'm trying to think what I use chickpea flour for.
For breading cauliflower.
Well, that one.
It tastes really cauliflower breaded with chickpea flour and some seasonings tastes really, really good. I love that.
Good. But the important part is the dipping sauce. I usually get the small jar of horseradish. I put that in a pan. I rinse that with some spring water, and I'll add a jar of spring water, a same size jar of soy sauce, and you simmer that for 20 minutes. And after you deep fry your little, what are they? They're dandelion onion tempura was the name of the recipe. But you dip those in that sauce, and it's really good. Making me think I'm going to make some today. But,
all of the spring foods are like blood purifiers. Apparently, we're supposed to eat blood purifying foods after we come out of the winter, because we've been eating heavier foods.
Yeah, especially the greens. I know, like dandelion, they always say is like a spring tonic, and I know it's loaded with really a lot of nutrients, and like I said, especially like vitamin A and vitamin C. So.
It can be used as a diuretic, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I believe, unlike the diuretics that your doctor will give you, then you need to take potassium with the diuretic that you get medically.
Right.
But dandelion is actually loaded with potassium, so it's a diuretic.
So you're getting both.
Exactly.
You're getting the diuretic and you're getting the potassium.
Right, all in one.
And another thing that'll be coming along in the month of May is burdocks.
Right. Yep. I have picked those too. I know a lot of people do, and that's the other thing I was going to say with actually the leeks. Actually, the leeks, the ramps, the dandelion, and leeks and ramps are the same thing. The ramps, the dandelion, the mustard, and if you happen to find some morels, I mean, you could actually saute those all together, and if you eat eggs, have that for breakfast. Like that. And a lot of times too, I know one friend of mine says, oh, you're going to have a little egg with your dandelion. It's like, well, that's the way it's done. You don't just like put a little bit of dandelion in it for color. I mean, it's a lot of dandelion with a little bit of egg. But same with the burdock too. I've had it that way, or just like cook it up as a green. But I know you can pick it later in the season too, but they say you have to peel the stem. It
gets tough later in the season. You have to clean it really good. It seems to accumulate a lot of dirt.
Right,
so.
It's got all those spiny stems on them. And I think the leaves have little spines on them.
I guess that is one food that you're definitely supposed to eat cooked.
Right.
I heard an herbalist say one time that it's known as a pot herb, meaning that you would cook it first.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So. I don't know if I've ever heard of anybody. And then another thing that's available soon, and it can be toxic if you pick it too late. But remember the old what was a song from the '60s, "Poke Salad Annie"? Poke stalks. When the poke comes up, you can actually cut that and cook it like asparagus. But it has to be picked when it's very, very young. Once the plant matures, it is toxic. And I know we might have mentioned on another show that Susan Weed, she's a prominent herbalist, but she said if you pick the berries of poke when they're dry and keep those berries, she goes, it works like an anti-inflammatory, like a Tylenol or something like that.
Oh,
But
really?
she said
Oh,
you just pop them though. You just eat them. She goes, if you chew them up and you chew up the seeds, she said you won't know which end to point at the toilet. She goes, because you're going to have
Oh no,
vomiting
you'll make
and
yourself.
diarrhea.
Yeah, I'd always heard that they were poisonous
Right,
and
right.
you shouldn't eat them.
But I think
so-
also like that song, the poke salad. I think when the plants are very small and young, like, I mean, I have them in my yard where, I mean, they're taller than me. They're like a huge, huge bush.
Oh, they grow all over the place out where we are.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're when they're small, you can actually still eat the leaves off of those. But that's another spring vegetable, if you will.
Of the wild kinds,
Right,
anyways. Yeah.
right, yeah.
Well, you can eat violets. They'll be coming up pretty soon. The ones that grow wild.
Right, right.
They taste quite good, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I've
And
had
they're
'em.
supposed to be a really good source of vitamin C. The violets are.
I would imagine, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, really, there's all kinds of books out on it. I know I've collected a lot of like wild, edible plants, and honestly though, with mushrooms, I've been like so careful with picking wild mushrooms because you have to be.
Oh, yeah,
to be
definitely.
safe. But
Definitely.
they say, well, I've probably found like, I'm going to say over 1,000 different types of mushrooms in my life, and I've eaten maybe a dozen. So like maybe 1 out of every 100 or something like that. Because it's a horrible way to go, honestly. And I don't know if I mentioned this before. It's kind of cute, but it's they say that there are old mushroom hunters and there are bold mushroom hunters, but there are no old bold mushroom hunters.
Really, yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
one time when I first moved back here, somebody advertised in the Penny Saver that they had free mulch hay, and it was on the hill between Cassadaga and Stockton. So I called the guy up and I went there, and they had a trailer that sat out in the open. So they used bales of hay or straw all the way around the skirting to keep the wind away from the underneath of the trailer. Well, come spring, he didn't need the hay anymore or straw, so I went up there to get it, and I'll take it all if you want to get rid of it. So I had to go up there several times with my truck, but he told his son, hey, why don't you go over and help this guy? So his son was helping me load it into the truck, and some of the bales were falling apart. And
Oh, okay.
one of the bales broke open, and there was like those grayish kind of black straw mushrooms growing between. And
was there?
this kid who looked to be like, I don't know, maybe he was 18 or 20 years old, he just like grabbed it and popped it in his mouth and ate it. And I just looked at him like, he's like, hey, you never know. It's like, yeah, you don't, do you? But I didn't find out.
Carl and I watched a movie recently. We got it on DVD, but it was something that had come out a few years ago, and I thought it looked interesting. So at the time, we didn't go to the movie theater to see it, but it's called Phantom Thread. It stars Daniel Day-Lewis, and he plays the part of a fashion designer. This was like maybe back in the 1940s or early 1950s or something, and anyways, he kind of fell in love with this girl who was a waitress in a restaurant, and got her to come and live with him. And he had this one woman that normally was the one that did his cooking for him. And she would go out and get mushrooms to cook. There was a certain kind of mushroom that he liked. And so anyways, the girl, it got to where she was taking the girl out to show her which kind of mushrooms to pick that he liked, and she was telling her how to make sure to pick the ones that were not poisonous. And the girl asks her, well, how do you tell the difference between the poisonous ones and the non-poisonous ones? And so she described how to tell the difference, and then in the meantime, the girl had noticed that whenever the man didn't feel good was when he'd be really nice to her, but after a while, he'd start to get kind of nasty and like that, and hard to get along with. So anyway, so anyway, in the meantime, she's learned to, somehow she knew which mushroom she could get to make him sick, but not, and how much of it to give him, how enough to make him sick,
Right.
but not enough to kill him,
Wow.
so that she could get him to go back into being nice to her for,
Yeah, right.
for a while. Yeah,
Jeez.
so because he'd gotten rid of other women he'd been involved with, apparently broke up with them, and they wound up getting married and everything, you know, and so that's what she would do, you know, when
Interesting.
when he'd start to be mean and nasty, she'd give him a little bit of poison, and somehow, maybe she knew what the antidotes were or something. Well, there was a book, you know, there was a
Right.
book in the kitchen that
Oh, I
the cook
see.
had showed her, you know, that had antidotes and everything in it. So it was
I
kind of
know. I
interesting.
know for some of the poisonous mushrooms, though. I mean, there's literally not, like, the thing is it destroys the function of your kidney and your liver.
Does it?
And so, like, a lot of times people say, "Oh, I ate that mushroom." They got sick right after they ate the mushroom. And I know Paul Stamets says, if you got sick within an hour or two of eating the mushrooms, he said, it wasn't from the mushroom. He said, it's the bacteria that was growing on the mushroom that made you sick. If a mushroom's going to make you sick, you won't get sick for probably, you won't start feeling sick for 3 or 4 days. Once you
I
start
see.
feeling sick and they take you to the hospital, your kidneys and liver are so toxic that they're not purifying your blood. So you basically poison yourself to death with your own poisons. I mean, they could put you on dialysis, but I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of spare livers for transplant available if they need them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that there was another thing that, I've heard some horror stories. And there's even some mushrooms that look, some poisonous mushrooms that look so similar to non-poisonous ones.
Usually in like the Audubon Society books, they'll say, you know, like if you're looking at a edible, they'll say, you know, poisonous lookalikes are blah, 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 and they'll identify those, so then you can go and look at it, like, and identify it. I know one time I found this one, and it looked just like the book, but I didn't get a spore print, and it was called the crown tip coral. And we saw it out in this swamp, and there's this white, like coral looking thing, and they had like 3 points at the top, so it looked like a crown. And I had, and one of the distinctive features of this mushroom is it tastes like fresh ground black pepper.
Oh.
And I had it sitting there, and I had the book out, and I'm like, boy, I don't know. And the thing is, now if I found it and I wanted to test it, you can put it in your mouth and chew it, and if it doesn't taste like black pepper, you can spit it out.
Right.
You don't have to swallow everything you put in your mouth. And I remember it was college roommate, he's like, well, that looks just like the book. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure 100%. And he just took a piece and started eating it. I'm like, does it taste like black pepper? He's like, it does. I'm like, well, that settles it. But he was one of those bold mushroom hunters,
Bold
apparently.
mushroom. Well, I'm definitely not one of those.
Yeah.
I never pick mushrooms in the wild.
Now there was this a client of mine, I can't remember who it was, some years ago, told me that when she was growing up, that her father would go out and hunt. He would find the wild mushrooms, and she said her mother would cook them, but she would serve them to him first, and then they would wait a few hours, and if he was okay, then she would serve it to the rest of the family.
Oh,
but
gosh.
but there is this old trick, and I think it does work sometimes. But if you take the fresh mushrooms and put them in a paper bag with a dime, the dime will turn black if it's if it's a poisonous mushroom. But
Oh, will
won't.
it? Oh.
Certain mushrooms, not
certain
all.
poisonous ones,
Right,
but not
right.
all of them.
But I
Okay.
told her, I said, well, that was really nice that your mom did that, but your dad probably wouldn't have felt sick for 3 or 4 days if he ate a poisonous mushroom. So, but yeah, I don't know. I see people that, it's surprising to me that more people don't die of it, because I've known friends that have gone out camping and they found wild mushrooms and they have them sitting someplace and everybody's eating like out of a pot of chili or soup, and they just push them into the pot, and they're cooked, and there are certain ones that will, a serving will kill you. They're so deadly.
Oh,
But
yeah.
a lot of people here, though, in the United States, the people that die here of mushroom poisoning are often Asians, because there's a mushroom over there that I can't tell you what the name of it is, but it's a choice edible. It's really, really good. It's really, really tasty. It looks very similar to a mushroom that's almost identical. It's one of those poisonous lookalikes, but it's called the death angel. So they will pick the one.
That's the one I've heard about on the news, that people think it's the one
Right.
from the country they live in, so they go ahead and eat it and then they die. Yeah.
Right, right. Yes. So, but yeah, I guess, I guess when we're getting to the airing of this show, that'll be the time to be planning everything, close to everything outdoors, because like I said, we're like 5 weeks almost from Memorial Day, and plus Memorial Day is late this year. It's the 31st.
Oh, is it?
So,
Yeah.
I'm thinking like the weekend, probably the Monday before that, like the 24th of May. I don't know about I know you probably have a later frost date than I do, but mine.
Yeah. Well, I've seen frosts in the first half of June.
Yeah. See, for me, I've seen it freeze on Memorial Day. I've seen it like 25 and 26 degrees, 25th, 26th of May. But our average last frost in Fredonia is May 20th. That's the average. There's been years where we didn't get any frost in May at all. So, at that point, and right now, like this weekend, I'm going to be rototilling, and I'll be planting, lettuce seed in the ground, and it's really about time. You could put beets in too. They need a little bit warmer soil. Like I said, my asparagus is up, 3 weeks early.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're not going to get any more cold. Spinach is a good time to plant right now too. Cooler weather stuff. I did not do peas, but peas I typically do around, right around the first day of spring, March 20th, 21st, something like that, if you can work the ground. I do know one of these years, somewhat recently, I don't know, within the last 10 years, we had super, super warm, mild weather in March, and I want to say it was about like March 7th, there was a few warm days in a row, and I remember thinking, like, I want to start the rototiller, but it's been sitting cold in the garage or in the barn like all winter. So on a day, I had my tunnel, I had my polytunnel, I rolled it into the tunnel so it'd be like 75 degrees during the day, and when I came home from work, it started on the second pull, but the surface was dry, the surface of the garden was dry, and we hadn't had any rain or snow in some time. But when I tried to rototill, it was so much mud underneath. So there's a way to adjust the tiller depth, and I adjusted it just to be just under the surface, and I was able to fluff through the drier stuff. And I planted my peas, I think it was the 7th or 8th of March, and by the 21st, they were up an inch already. So by the time I would normally plant them, they were already growing. And I did have a slightly earlier pea crop that year. So
yeah. It almost seems to me that if you get them planted in the month of March, it's the best pea crops that you wind up having.
Right. I know my friend Bob lived down Greenwood Lakes, New York, and I asked him if he planted peas and spinach. No, he said, you can't plant those things down here. He said, because it just gets too hot too soon. I said, but you plant on the first day of spring. He's like, what? I said, you plant them in March. What? So he's like, yeah, you plant them in March. That way they're ready in the end of June. And he'd never heard of planting stuff that early. But that's really, for the cold weather stuff, and fava beans too, are cold weather like that. So you can plant those early.
Do you plant fava beans?
I used to. Yeah,
you
I
used
haven't.
to, but you've gotten away from it.
I haven't been doing it in the last few years. And actually, in Fredonia, the old Italian growers, gardeners, farmers say that you plant your peas on St. Patrick's Day and your fava beans on St. Joseph's Day. Which I was always like, why would you do it on 2 different days? But people say, well, if you've been inside all winter and you haven't been doing any gardening, you got to break it up 2 days apart. So.
I see.
And then the other thing is, and that I would go with, but they say to plant your garlic on Columbus Day. Now, for you, maybe you could do that. I've always waited until the end of October, usually Halloween or close to that. If it looks like we're having a dry week the week before Halloween and it's going to start raining on Halloween and be wet, I'll get it in a little before that. But I wait till the very end of October because.
Well, last year it seems to me it must have been raining a lot in October because for some reason that must have been it. It must have been raining a lot. Carol wasn't able to plant the garlic in October. But then we had that nice warm weather right after Election Day. Remember, we had maybe
do
about
remember.
a,
It was kind of milder.
about a
Yeah.
week's worth of, shortly,
Mine, you know-
it was right after Election Day. The weather warmed up.
That might have been the weekend that I planted, because I remember now that I had these two girls help me plant the garlic, and one had to leave when we were done with the garlic, and my friend Sean showed up with Jerusalem artichokes for me to plant. And he showed up just as the one was leaving, and I said, well, let's just plant these right away. And I know that it was November when
Yeah,
he brought those.
yeah,
so
because
it was probably that first Saturday in
Carl
November.
was getting worried about it. He wanted to get that garlic planted, and there was always something standing
Well, and I do
in the way.
remember-
And then finally, we got that warm weather in November, and that's when he wound up planting
I want to
the
say,
garlic.
I think in 2018, it was super, super wet too, going into the end of October. And my normal garlic beds were, it's kind of like a little bit of a downhill, and about a third of the beds were underwater. Like, well, I can't plant these in mud. I mean, what am I going to do? So I picked a new spot in a place where I had like a huge compost pile, and that's where I planted them. And I remember thinking, like, I got to get these in. I got to get these in. And one friend of mine said, well, I broke all the clothes apart because it was so cold outside. And I was like, no, I'm just going to take the bulbs and break them up out there. And like, she's right, because if you go out there and you have to break them up, it's going to take longer to plant them. So I sat at my kitchen counter, popping the clothes, breaking the clothes into buckets. I have two, like 1 gallon bucket fulls of two strains that I was going to grow. And I know I had like something like a 6 o'clock appointment at my office. By the time I got done popping the clothes, it was like, I think it was 4:15. So I went down there with the 2 buckets, and I planted 3 rows in this bed, grabbed the other bucket, planted 3 rows coming back. The sun was already set by the time I was done. I looked, it was 5:08, so I had enough time to make it to my appointment. But that was November the 8th, and we got like 7 inches of snow overnight from the 9th to the 10th, but it warmed up and it melted after that, and I had a normal, decent crop after that. So you can go well into a little bit into November. Well, it depends on where you are too. I mean, I think where you are, I think it gets colder faster and it warms up slower in the springtime. So for you, from what I've read, for the USDA climate zone map for where we are, they say start around the 15th to about the 30th, but for me, I always go later, because the one year when I first moved back here, I moved here in 1990, but in this fall of 91 was my first time I was going to plant garlic, and I was going to plant 300 pounds of garlic.
Oh, really?
And,
wow. Well, you sell it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. I was going to the farmer's market. I had a CSA. I was selling to restaurants. So I actually had I started on the 15th because I'm like, I don't know how long this is going to take me to plant 300 pounds. I think I finished around 28th of October, and we had such a super mild November and December that year that by Christmas my garlic was as tall as my garlic is now. I mean, it was this big, and it was a dry winter. It was windy, and my mulch kept blowing away. And I remember going out probably 3 times in December and January with a rake and trying to pile the stuff back up, because now you got green stuff above the ground and no snow to cover them. And I had probably the worst garlic crop I ever did, and I was like, you know what? You think about it, that little clove produced this plant, and then in the middle of the winter, it got burned all the way back off, so that whatever's left is what was there to produce the plant for the next year. So, it'd almost be like right now, think about your garlic, if it's up this tall, and Carl mistakenly went over it with the lawnmower right now. I mean, it probably wouldn't be as good of bulbs as if he didn't. I one year admitted bad mistake. I'm probably doing this today, but I flame weed my asparagus. Because if there's any weeds and anything in there, and there's asparagus coming up, you flame it. You just go over it with the flame, and it just cooks all the weeds, and it just dehydrates them all. Well, my garlic beds were right next to that, and they're mulched with straw, and I'm like, it wasn't windy. I'm like, I'll be careful. I'll be okay. And I was burning an area about 1.5 foot at a time. I'm going along. And this was all of the stalks of the asparagus had fallen this way. So where I'm flaming is like right where all the big thick stalks had fallen over. Well, I got about a third of the way down the bed. Well, all of the other asparagus had fallen this way. So all those thin, wispy, ferny tops were right there. That flame hit that, and it started like really, really going. A slight breeze came up from behind me. The flames, I had 15 feet of fire on top of it. And my straw beds with my garlic was right there. I'm like, no! I'm trying to stomp it all out. And I had a swimming pool where I catch rainwater off of my barn. And I only had one bucket there. And I thought ahead of time, should I get the hose? No, I'll be fine. I won't need the hose. I burned the mulch off about 2/3 of my garlic. They're all like black and wilty and yellow, but they came back. They did come back. And I remember when I was picking, like, boy, these did not do that good in this really great soil this year. But then I was like, oh, because you burned them up back in May or whatever it was. But I don't have any mulch near those now, so that it won't be a problem today.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, we'll be into the heat of the gardening season in a month from now. So I mean, I don't know. I know I'll be doing beets and lettuce here probably this next week. Well, like we said, it's probably it's supposed to be like 70s and 80 this next week. So that should help things to germinate too. And I don't know. I know too. People are thinking that this is odd that we had this cold snap, but
not for here.
No. And when we were having those warmer days, and I see all the buds and everything coming out of the trees, it's like May 20th is the average freeze, and I mean that's a month from now. I mean we have another month where the average where we could still get. But that's the other thing too, though. I know a lot of my friends. I'll tell them that I've planted peas and spinach. They're like, well, do you realize it's going to get cold again? I'm like, I'm expecting it to get cold again, but I mean, spinach can actually go down to 13 degrees and
can
not
it
freeze.
really? Oh, yeah, I didn't know
cabbages too. But the one thing about the stuff in the cabbage family, and I learned this the hard way, is if you plant bok choy, Napa cabbage, broccoli, anything like that, now, if the temperatures go below 50 for more than a couple of days, you definitely are. What will happen is you'll get this nice big broccoli plant, looks gorgeous. The head will start, it'll get about 2 inches, and then it just goes right to seed. So the biggest head, and then if you try to pick that, it's really bitter. They're not very good. So they will, it's like, I want to say like biologically, internally, they think that they've gone through a winter, so they're biennial, so they go to seed in the second year. So if you're growing it and then it gets cold for a little bit, they won't produce the head or whatever the full size thing that you're looking for in the ends, because it just it triggers them that way. And I know that Elliot Coleman actually had a little trick that he did with you never heard of anybody growing artichokes around here, because that's more like a Southern California or Texas, Arizona thing like that. Well, he would actually start. I can't remember. I think they had to be the artichoke plants had to be 9 weeks old to start with. But then he would put them out in a cold frame, and as long as they had about 2 weeks of colder temperatures in the cold frame, you could plant those out. Now usually an artichoke in its more native areas, it's like a bush. I mean, it's like 6 foot by a 4 foot bush, and there's artichokes all over it. Well, when you do it that way, it's a 1 year plant. I mean, and they're a biennial. So if you planted a seed of a artichoke, it would grow a big bush the first year, and it's in the second year that it'll start to produce the flower is what you eat. So the way Elliot would do it, you would get fruit in the same season, but they'd maybe be like waist high, so maybe a 3 foot tall bush. But it was one of his little tricks. A lot of like messing around to get local artichokes, but it's doable.
Now, speaking of spring fruits that grow around here, now people have always told me that you're supposed to quit picking your asparagus on the 15th of June. Now, what is your view on that? They said it needs to, something about it won't come back again? Or
well, yeah, if you overpick, you can kill it, actually, yeah. So the way I've always thought and believed, and I've read this, that if you just plant asparagus this year, you shouldn't pick any of it at all.
Okay.
In the second season, they say maybe pick for about a week In the third season, they say you could pick for a couple of weeks, but after that, they say you can pick for about a month. So whenever it starts, figure you got about 4, maybe 5 weeks until you should stop. But yeah, I've known people that are like, no, you just keep picking it and picking it. Well, I don't know what happened to mine. I don't have it anymore. It's like, because what you're doing, like, you know how, like, when you stop picking it, that asparagus spear or whatever you want to call it will eventually turn into the big, tall fern thing that they're like 5, 6 feet tall. Yeah. So that energy that plant creates feeds that root. So then when it dies off in the fall, then the energy is in that root to put up more shoots. And if you keep cutting and cutting and cutting those shoots,
if you do it all summer, you're not going to have any the next year.
If you wait until July to stop picking, it's probably going to have very weak little shoots coming up. So yeah, you got to leave some strength in the root to build a decent fern to build next year's crop, basically. But yeah, after I flame mine, I will be getting straw to it. I'll just mulch in heavily with straw. And I think we mentioned this before, but a nice little trick, I don't know if I'm going to get to it this year, but planting, after you get your asparagus established, like let's say you plant it this year or maybe you planted it last year, the next year you can plant a strawberry plant in between each one and they'll take over. So strawberries are very shallow rooted. Asparagus is really deep rooted, so they don't really compete that way. And so you can actually have one bed and get 2 crops out of it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so those are, kind of it's not, I don't know if it's necessarily, companion planting. It is, I don't know if they really benefit each other, but they don't really compete.
Have you done that in past years?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I have a row, I want to say it's like 44 feet long, and I think I planted, about every 1.5 foot. So I think there's like 30 asparagus plants, and there was about 30 strawberry plants. And of course, eventually the strawberries take over. They put out runners and stuff. But yeah, I have pictures in my phone. I have grape crates full of nice strawberries. My favorite developed for New York State, Honey Eye is
the best strawberry.
I like it. It was bred especially for flavor, and so like a lot of these, I know. Like I used to work when I was up in Vermont. I worked for I think it was Four Corners Farm or something like that. They had 30 acres of strawberries. They had everything, but that was like their big thing with strawberries. And I know the guy was saying, they got these new varieties, and he said, some of these strawberries, he said they're like the size of a kitten's head. He said, but they don't taste like anything. No. Like some people say, they're all show and no go. They're just like don't have. And to me, I always look for everything that I grow to have flavor, because the more the flavor it has, the more vitamins and nutrients it typically has.
And the more likely you are to eat them if they taste really good. Yeah.
But I don't know if you've ever eaten. I know I'm supposed to be getting some seed this weekend for the Sun Gold cherry tomatoes, but the sugar content of them when they're ripe is the same as like a grape. So they can be 20% sugar content, but they're also an orange cherry tomatoes, so they're less acidic, and they're like eating candy. You go out in the field and pick the thing. Plus, these plants grow huge, and they're just loaded with fruit.
Well, when I was reading about the Hoxie natural cancer therapy. Maybe you've heard of it. I don't know. But
yeah, I've seen the movie.
I remember that they never let their cancer patients, eat tomatoes because of it being an acid food. Apparently, acid feeds any acidic foods.
Well, I have the whole thing on acid-alkaline balance, and you're supposed to eat 80% alkaline, 20% acid. But the thing is that that's not necessarily true, because what they're measuring is the ash. Because you think like, tomatoes are acidic, or you think like a citrus would be acidic. But if they're fully ripened, they're actually alkaline. So a lot of times, you buy a tomato at the store, yes, that's probably acid. But if you pick a fine ripe tomato, and the same thing with like oranges. A lot of times our citrus that comes up from Florida is picked green and gassed. So you ever see, that looks like a nice orange, and you eat it, and it's like it doesn't have any flavor. Well, because they gassed it, they picked it green, so it doesn't have the sweetness to it. But I don't know if you've ever had a friend of mine's uncle or grandfather grew heirloom citrus down in Florida, and he brought back some stuff. He's like, yeah, try this. Oh, this is my grandfather's. I was like, I have never had anything like this. And I mean, I'm sure it would be like the same thing as like if you've eaten store-bought tomatoes all your life and then you had a homegrown
Oh, yeah.
vine-ripened tomato.
Yeah, they're
it's
definitely different.
It's a completely
Yeah.
different thing. But I know that is sometimes. But I don't. I do know though too. Like a lot of people with.
Well,
Anything in the nightshade family. I mean, nightshades. I mean, there's a city in Italy where they actually have a huge celebration because for many years, people that when they brought tomatoes from South America, Columbus brought tomatoes back to Europe. People would not eat tomatoes only if they were cooked for a long time in sauce because everybody believed that it was poison because it's a deadly nightshade. But there was some very brave guy in some little town in Italy, and he was attributed to be the first guy to eat a raw ripe tomato. So they have a big celebration. I think people throw tomatoes at each other.
Well, I think that in the case of cancer patients, they have to cut way back on the acid. They need to stay on a mainly alkaline diet.
But 20% acid is where you're supposed to be. 80% alkaline. Most Americans eat 80% acid and 20% alkaline.
I know. That's why so many people have so many health problems is they eat too much acid.
Right, and it causes like problems with arthritis. And I know at one point my friend Jean Franklin is a PhD in she's a nutritionist, holistic nutrition, and she worked with me with the acid alkaline balance thing, and it was amazing how much better I felt. I mean, it took a couple of months, but I was like, this is the best I've ever felt. I mean, you wake up without any aches and pains in your joints or anything.
Exactly. If you're eating only raw foods, it's been my experience that that's the best I ever feel is when I'm eating only raw plant foods. For some reason, you have enormous amounts of energy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, but I do know, like with that. I mean, I know I was eating. I think I was eating. I was like actually soaking and cooking my own soybeans. I know I was like, and that's a funny thing too. You wouldn't think like two different types of rice. One would be alkaline, one would be acid. But the most alkaline type of rice is long grain brown rice. Short grain brown rice is more acidic.
Is it?
Long grain is alkaline. And how they measure that is they take the rice, they burn it, and then they measure the acid or alkalinity of the ash. So it's not like, oh, this is tart, this must be acid, so it's acidic. It's not what you taste, it's the ash that's there after it's
What about
burned.
medium grain brown rice?
Don't know. I mean, it's
Would that be like half and half?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are things like all fats are neutral. They fall like right in the middle. And I know on the far side of alkaline are like lemon, watermelon, dates, and figs. And on the more acid side, of course, cigarettes, liquor, red meat, those sorts of things. And again, like they say, it's not like you shouldn't ever have those things. I mean, maybe not the cigarettes and the liquor, but just make sure it stays into that 20%.
Keep it down to that 20%. Well, I hate to say it, but we've come to the end of another episode of Fresh Perspectives. I want to say thank you for coming on again. You've been such a good sport.
A little late notice this time, but yeah, we did good.
But it worked out anyways, and I'll see those rest of you in the viewing audience on the next episode.